Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to GEEXX Reads. Today I'm going to talk about Full Moon by Jim Butcher, an image which you will see here. This is book 2 of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I haven't read a lot of Jim Butcher recently. He kind of didn't write for several years because I found he was getting a divorce, so I didn't write any books at all for 5 years. So I kind of fell off on the Dresden Files a bit, but then I realized that during the COVID, he had released another book in the Dresden Files. So I thought I would refresh my memory and go through the series again. I've already reviewed book 1 previously, so I figured book 2. And I think, considering the time of year, this would be a good choice. The play on words in the titles for these books is evident, especially in this one. A little bit of outlining of the story, minor spoilers maybe, but business has been slow for Dresden. His normal business flow from the Chicago PD Special Investigations Unit has dried up. Karen Murphy has not been giving him any calls for business recently. She does finally call him about a suspicious death in which there are some unusual prints. And there have been previous deaths before this one, all occurring on or around the nights of the full moon. So you might guess what this story is about. Dresden has to, dredge up information about werewolves, both to help Karen with her investigation and, to help him help her. There's some old characters returning from the first book and some new characters introduced in this book as well. One of the things that I do like about the book itself, aside from the fact that it's a murder mystery, is that in Harry's research, he does go over the different types of werewolves. Werewolf mythology, I've always been fascinated by it, and there are different types of werewolves, or different ways in which one can become a werewolf. There's the curse, there's being bitten, there's people who are insane who think they're werewolves. There's people who put on a belt of wolf fur and transform that way. There's, various different types of werewolves in mythology. And Harry Dresden does a good job of researching them. They have the Dresden universe take on them. They don't match up 100% with the mythology as I remember it from when I was reading years and years ago, being interested in werewolf lore. And of course, this all takes place in Chicago. Johnny Marcone, the crime boss from the previous novel, makes an appearance. There's still like the Dresden Files stuff. There's Harry's, ego, Harry's personality, which if you've read the first book in the series, you're well acquainted with it. Harry is he portrays himself as kind of an underdog. He's a powerful wizard, but inexperienced. Inexperienced because he doesn't have the time to do the research he would like to do. He's basically stuck trying to pay the bills and feed himself. He could be a much better wizard if he had the time to do research and practice, as opposed to just trying to keep a roof over his head and food in his belly. So that's kind of his persona, the fact that he has a lot of potential, but doesn't get to exercise it. The other thing that I've noticed about Dresden after rereading the books again, is that Harry's kind of a chauvinist, which is surprising. He kind of, I don't think the author, I'm not sure how much the author intended that. I think there is some of it, but it's under the guise of chivalry. Harry thinks he's an old-fashioned chivalrous type of guy, holding doors open for women and that kind of thing. But he is kind of condescending towards women. Not overtly, but, he views women as the fairer sex that need to be protected. One of the things that I do like about the books is that I think the author is aware of it. I don't know if he's aware of how much of it, but he is aware of it, and I think some of it might be slightly intentional, because when he kind of goes into overt chauvinism, there's a subtle hint that he realizes he may be doing something wrong. So, and I think occasionally other characters do call him out on it, telling him he's chauvinistic, but I'm not sure how much else I want to give away of the book. It is a werewolf book, and a murder mystery, and a Dresden Files book. So, like I said, Karen Murphy, McNally's Pub. I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous review. One of the things that kind of turns me off about the Dresden Files novels is the fact that, it's going to sound weird, but the fact that they're standalone novels. I think my chair just, over the course of this discussion, my chair has gone down. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm closer to the floor than I was when I first got here. I think my chair, the hydraulics on my chair are going because it won't stay up. Anywho, where was I? Oh yeah. These books are all standalone, but because of that, whenever you pick up one of the Dresden Files books, they do plot exposition for everything. You have to, because it's a standalone book, Butcher isn't taking into account that people may have read the previous books. He has to describe McNally's Pub, where Harry spends a lot of time. He has to describe Harry's office, Harry's apartment, Harry's little spiritual assistant, Bob. He has to describe Karen Murphy. He has to describe his car. He has to describe everyone that is, he has to describe Johnny Marcone and his, and then the few henchmen that, are regulars from Johnny Marcone's mob connections. So anytime you're reading these books, you are given the plot exposition over and over and over again. There's 15 books in the series. So if you wanted to read these books back to back, I would not recommend it, because I did that once. And I think it was like the 12th or 13th book. And it was after like the third or fourth book, the plot exposition, the continuous repetitive plot exposition was just a mind-numbing slog, and I could not stand it. I recommend, if you are going to read these books, and since I am working my way to the final book that came out during COVID, I will be reviewing these as I read them, but I'm not going to do like I did with the Foreigner series back to back to back, for the same reasons I am discussing it here. I do not want to have to go through that plot exposition. So I will be reading 1 or 2 books between this and book 3. Man, I really didn't talk about the book much at all. I talked more about my opinions of it. And I guess that's what I do. This is not quite as much. The first book was much more of a noir detective novel. This is kind of leaning more into the wizardy stuff of it, I guess. You could say it doesn't feel as much like a detective noir book as Stormfront did. Stormfront felt like a detective novel. This is leaning a bit more towards wizard adventure, modern wizard adventure, than the previous, detective noir stuff. I still enjoy it, but it was the noir detective stuff that pulled me in, because it was a twist on the genre. So, and I have noticed that as the books progress, it leans away from the noir detective and more into the contemporary wizard stuff. Still good, but I miss the noir detective crap, because that is what really pulled me in it and hooked me. But I do still enjoy the books. In the series itself, I'm not sure I would place this as how I would rank it amongst the other books in the series. I have always said the first 3 books in the series are my favorites, and that still holds true. There are a couple other books about midway through that I really, really enjoyed. And some of them that, you know, dropped down to like B or B plus. But yeah, this is still in the A, grade A category. So crappy review, but I've talked about it, and it's something I put on my YouTube channel. I'll put it on the shelf later. As always, thanks for watching. Gotta get the chair fixed. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.